Okay guys, what I figured I'd do today, seeing as I've searched for it on YouTube and surprisingly absolutely no one has ever done it that I know of that I could find, I am going to do a full video on rebuilding a mag plate for a OMC engine. That's a Johnson, Evinrude, I think, Gale, all the older Sears branded OMCs. There's a couple of them, I can't name them all. But they're all going to be very similar. They're all going to use the same coils, the same condensers, the same point sets, and the wire that you're going to use is just standard copper core spark plug wire. You can't use the stuff for cars, I'm told. Well, at least the majority of the stuff you can just buy in Canadian Tire. This is a specialty stuff. It's just plain copper cord spark plug wire. So right now you're seeing a mag plate off a 1954 Johnson 10 horsepower. And I'm going to strip it all down and rebuild it. I just figured I'd show you this to start off with. Once you pulled the flywheel, and on the older models the cam that operates the points will pull off too. On the newer ones it's attached and keyed in there. Once you've done that, you're going to want to remove these two screws. They're going to be about 3-inch screws, 2-inch screws that go down through the coils and into the bracket, and then there's going to be two more, one there, very short straight-headed screws you're going to remove, and then any other peripherals like the spark plug wires, obviously anything holding them. You're going to want to remove this arm that connects to the throttle linkage, and then you should be able to pull the entire mag off the motor. It's not a necessary step. You can in fact rebuild this with it on the motor, leaving these two short screws attached and just rebuilding it on the motor. I like to take it clean off, and then I'm going to strip it down, but when it is stripped down I like to degrease it completely so that you can see that it's grease free. And I like to clean the upper shaft in the motor off so that there's no grease to fly in here, because any amount of anything, contaminants on those points, will make your motor stop running, or one cylinder in your motor stop running, and that is no fun when you're out in the lake. So the parts you're going to need to rebuild this, depending on the motor, the plug wires may very well still be totally good. That's kind of at your discretion. In this case they're good, but they're a bit short and they've had messed ends put on them. I think I'm going to reuse them, except I'm going to put a proper spark plug end and a boot on. You can buy them just about anywhere. They're cheap. They're like $1 a piece. There's a million different designs, so I'm not going to really show you how to attach them because there are ones that push through the wire, there are ones that push in it. Just read the instructions with the ones you get. As far as the mag itself goes, the coils, you're going to want to order these if they are cracked around here, which the originals will be quite often, or if you've decided that that is the issue. There are other issues though other than these coils, but if they're old coils, they're cracked, you're going to want to replace them. Otherwise you might get away with them. In this case, these painted green ones, I think they're Sierra. They're cheapies, but they're still good coils. You can buy them at iBoats.com, which is a really great website. Even though I'm in Canada, ordering them from the US is still pretty cheap with shipping. Or any marina will stock them. The part number for any year is the same. These run in between like 25 horsepower and like the 3.5 horsepower OMC motors. They're nothing special. You can get them just about any dealer that deals in OMC. On the shelf too. You don't got to wait to have them ordered there. This is a big issue here that can really mess you, because these coils cost, 15, 20 bucks a piece. These are the condensers. These are what hold the power that these coils produce, and when one of these goes, there's no obvious sign that it's bad. So it can really mislead you into replacing coils that appear to be good, but can still, obviously, they can appear to be good but be bad. But these are what I would replace first, seeing as they cost next to nothing, and if your coils look to be good, 90% of the time they are. And these can break down as they heat up, so your motor might run perfect at the beginning. Coils can too. But as they start to heat up, they start to malfunction, and then the main cause of any issues is going to be your points. Any amount of dirt, anything. So you want to get those spotless clean. You got to gap them using the set screws to exactly what your motor specifies. Sand them off, clean them, degrease them. That is going to be 80% of your troubles with a Magneto in a motor, is just dirty points. Of course, if the motor's set, then more than likely you're going to have to replace coils and condensers. And if you'd like the points, in this case these were replaced not long ago, I'm just going to strip this down now and show you the complete rebuild. So I'm not going to show you the disassembly, but I'll show you the reassembly. The disassembly is fairly easy. Everything just comes apart, and you can always reverse the reassembly instructions to get the disassembly instructions. So I'll get on that, and then I'll be right back. I just figured I'd pause while I'm in the process of dismantling this to mention one more thing. You're going to want to remember, just for ease of reassembly, which coil, condenser points, and that goes to which cylinder. Now, one of your spark plug leads is going to have a marker. It says up. That's the top cylinder. So you trace it out, it goes to this coil. And usually they have a mark. In this case it has an E there. I'm not sure if that's meant to be marking that this is the upper cylinder, but that's what I'm going to remember. This is the upper cylinder. Depending on if you're troubleshooting, you might want to flip components like the coils to see if the problem follows the coil to the other cylinder. So it's a good thing to memorize where, or mark with a magic marker, which part came off which cylinder. So I'll get back when I'm done totally dismantling. Okay, so once you have it totally stripped down, this is what you're going to be left with. This may look different depending on your model boat motor. This changed. This will be a different material, pot metal in a newer motor versus this like cast aluminum or something in the older motors, but it's all going to be the same component wise. So we have our two condensers, little hold down for the spark plug wires, the 2 or 4 bolts that hold the coils on, your 2-point sets. One's going to have a gold bottom, one's going to have a silver bottom if you buy them brand new. Don't ask me why, they're the exact same to me, but I always just put the gold bottom. I'll show you that later. You're going to have somewhere in here a oiler that oils the cam. Keep the points moving freely with some light oil. 2 coils, which you're probably going to have brand new, along with brand new condensers. And then 2 more locking screws that hold this on. Now on a newer motor, it's nice. They have locking washers on everything. On these old ones, for some reason they don't. Maybe it's just every one I've ever played with, they've been lost. But I think they just didn't put them on these older motors. So it might be a good idea to go out to your hardware store and pick up some lock washers, or put a little bit of Loctite on this when we reassemble it. So now on to reassembly. Of course you're going to want to make sure this is totally clean. Mine isn't really. You don't want any oil splashing into the points, so you want to clean off anything that has a chance of that. And once you're done that, the first thing we're going to want to do is replace the bottom of the point set. So here is the gold one. When you're looking at this, you're going to notice that it has this one odd shaped bolt standoff. That is for the oiler for the cam. So what I like to do is I look at that up there, And the gold set of points, as you can see, one's silver, one's gold, is going to go down here. Now I still have this screw in here. This is just an adjuster, so we don't got to worry about that yet. When you buy these new, mine have already been put together once, so I'm not too worried about it. When you buy these new, they come with a little grease packet. Little dab of grease down there. It's unnecessary, but I did it anyway, I think. And you're just going to want to line this up with the post going through there. Drop it down over this set screw in the slot until it seats down firmly. Now there's going to be this screw hole, that's the locking screw, and you have a screw and a little flat washer that isn't a locking washer that I can tell. It's just a little flat metal washer that lets it slide when you're adjusting. That you're going to want to replace next into there. Tighten it down firmly enough that you can just barely wiggle this. Just hand tight. Okay, once you have that set, nice and hand tight in there, like that. You're going to make sure that this is seated all the way down, which is good. And we're going to proceed to put on the actual point itself. Now, this is a really good time to make sure these are polished clean. If they're used points, which is totally okay, there's no need to go out replacing these unless, of course, this plastic bushing's worn where it's got play in it, or the point is burnt or sanded down, as people clean these with sandpaper to nothing. As long as all these bits look good, your points are still good. I replaced these last year. I just tore this motor down to do a bit of a rebuild on it, so I figured I'd do this. Now, that grease packet, this is where it comes in handy. You're going to want to grease inside that plastic bushing in there, a little bit on the shaft. Don't go crazy with it though. You don't want any of that migrating up here onto the point itself and messing up the connection. So once that's done, the point is going to slide on there, and then this spring steel is going to be pushed. Oh, I missed. This is difficult to do, especially more so when it's doing it one-handed. The spring steel here, as you can see, is going to tuck behind this metal post. I'm going to bend the point in, and there we go. Seat this all the way down, and that's your points. Now they don't line up perfect, that's okay. They never do, because this is adjustable. They're never going to be perfectly round on round. As long as there's a good connection there, you're good. Next in the line is going to be this little clip. This is not fun. It's got these little ends, and you have to slip this clip over these two pieces of metal, the spring steel and the post. Obviously you can't see me doing it, and I don't think there's a way I can show it, but it has two little indents, little indent in that piece of metal. You have to get this clipped over them. It's just a retainer that doesn't really do a whole lot of anything in my mind. Oh, I just did it one-handed. Just like that there, till it pops into the indents. You'll know it when you have it, and I have it. That's impressive. Continuing on, now is the most fun part of all. This little strange clip. It's not like it's like a C-clip, but it is not shaped like one. And it is going to go onto the shaft in a groove like that there and be clipped in. This one, you're on your own. Pair of pliers, a small screwdriver. There's not really a great way to do this because unlike a C-clip, you can't use a pair of C-clip spreader pliers and put it in the two holes and spread it and put it on. You just have to get it on there with a small pair of pliers. So, best of luck to you on that one. Now that we have that assembled, imagining that we actually have that on there, you move on to the next set of points, which is identical, except this is going to be silver, I think, if you buy it brand new. versus gold, even though they all kind of look the same on the camera. The point itself is always silver for some reason. Moving on, the next thing we want to do, we could do either the coil or we could do the condenser. I think I'm going to do the coil first, just for ease of space. Now, if you're doing this coil, which is going to be the, since we have the mark, the top cylinder, you got to remember to put this little oiler that comes pre-moistened with oil onto that oddly shaped standoff prior to putting the coil on. So, now that we have that all ready, imagining that we've done these points first, I'm not going to do them for the sake of camera time. You want to make sure both point sets are done first. We're going to move on to the coils. So I marked the one that came out of the top cylinder just because I can, and I wanted to put them back the same way they came. You're going to find that you have two wires. One's going to be short and on the top and black. It's just a ground that just needs to be grounded. The other one is going to be green, which in this case, this coil, the wire rubbed and got split open on the flywheel by the last guy who installed it. So I put a piece of heat shrink tubing, but in your average case, it's going to be green like that. This is going to go to the point set with the condenser. This is going to go to ground. Now, we can't install it just yet because we have to install the spark plug wire into the coil. There's a metal pin down there. Find my upper cylinder wire. And all that metal pin does is push into the conductor in the center of the wire, and that's how you get your contact. Now first you're going to want to, when you buy your spark plug wire, they're going to have little packets usually on the counter of the parts place called dielectric grease. It prevents this from corroding up in here, and it also helps get this in there. So you're going to want to put a little dab down in there, a little dab on the end here of the grease, and then you simply line up the pin in there with the center conductor of this and push it in there. You're going to have to wiggle and push and fight, and it's good to get an idea on the writing of how long it is so that you know by going like this right about when it's seated in the bottom, because you want to push it all the way in. And once you have that done, obviously I can't do it one-handed, we'll get back to reassembling the mag. One more quick tip while you're installing the wires and the coils. The factory coils, the new ones, come with a little rubber boot that just pushes over the wire loosely and pushes over this and provides somewhat of a seal. Now what I like to do, in this case I don't even have them because the person who originally built this mag didn't use them, is I get a piece of heat shrink tubing of the appropriate diameter, and, bear with me here, slide it on the wire up over the coil like so, and then shrink it down, and that helps prevent the wire being pulled from the coil or the moisture getting in there and causing a bad connection. That's just a quick tip. I'm not saying it's the right way, not saying it's the wrong way either. You can or can't do that, doesn't really matter. Just something I like to do. Okay, so provided you've been following along, we should now have both sets of points installed, same as the first set we did. We should have this cam oiler stuck on there, or remember to put it on there as we install the coils, which we should have wired and either heat shrink tube or the original little rubber boot put over there. Either way works good. So now we're at the point of installing our first coil. I said I was going to do the upper cylinder first, which is E, which does matter because the wires are going to be a different length. This one is the upper cylinder wire and coil. So we begin by feeding the wire down through the mag, like so. Probably would have been better done with a tripod. And placing the coil there. Now it's going to be fairly obvious where the wire is going to want to run underneath here. In this case, right there is where the clamp goes, and right there is where it leaves the mag plate. So that's all. In the other case of the coil, it's going to have to run all the way down this channel, under there, and then out right next to this wire. So now that we have that in position, making sure we got that oiler still in there, the first screw I like to put in is through this ground wire, which is just going to be one of these longer screws. In a newer motor, you're going to have a lock washer. In an older one, you're just going to have the screw alone. Down through the hole. This might be a bit of a fight because that wire is going to fight you a bit until we get it in. And then just loosely put in that screw. Now, this is where things get a bit interesting. When you install these, they have a bit of play. You want these to be front face, perfectly aligned with the very top of this. This has a little bit of a chamfer in at the top, this little metal piece it rests on. You want it to sit just a hair behind that or exactly in line of it. If it's forward and flush with the outer face here, it's going to rub on the flywheel and bad things are going to happen. So we're going to, for now, just loosely set in these. You can also get a ring from OMC that they used to make. I'm sure you can find them on eBay, that goes around both coils, and it's the exact inner diameter of the flywheel for spacing these, but eyeballing it with that is what I think just about everybody does. So now that that's done, we know where our ground wire is going to be under that bolt. This here is not going to be installed until this is on the engine, because this actually travels all the way through and helps bolt this to the pivot on the top of the engine. So we don't have to worry about that bolt. Next is going to be this wire, which when you install this, while it's still loose, you're going to want to make sure is tucked neatly underneath the coil. It has a little spot down there where it is fairly obviously intended to go. You're going to want to make sure it goes there. Next up, once we have this snug down, is going to be a condenser. Now the condenser simply sits in like that and has one of these screws with, of course, a lock. The most unimportant bolt in this motor, in this mag, actually has a lock washer. Just holds this in this general position. That is going to hold on the condenser to the mag. So you can tighten this one right down, and you have this little bit of play. You want to just tuck it in right about in the center, right, so you have enough room to tuck the wires and all. You can tighten this one nice and tight right now, because there's no adjustment needed later on. And this is one time I'm not kidding about nice and tight. You don't want to just snug these. I'm going to go over that again with two hands. This is important. This stuff rattles loose and something hits the flywheel in your motor, you're going to be paddling home. So you want things to be tight. Next, you're going to want to bend this wire, which is difficult because this one has heat shrink tubing on it since it was worn, around, and this wire and these two little eyelets. You're going to run this screw through, this being the wire off the condenser and the green wire coming out of the bottom of the coil. And I'm going to do this with two hands. You're then going to screw that into this small hole in the point set. It should be fairly obvious when you have this in your hands what you're doing. So that's about as far as I can go. I'm now going to go back and install the other coil, the other condenser, and then we'll get back. Okay, provided we've followed along this far, you should have this. Everything I've only done once, but obviously it's just exactly mirrored to the other side. I have just noticed I've done something different here actually. This wire being a ground, I grounded to this side of the coil where there's one hole. The two-hole side over here is empty. This side I grounded it to the side with two holes. Now this should make no difference. It doesn't really matter which side you ground it to, but I do kind of like this idea more. Just keeps things out of the way. But it'll work the same. Anyway, we should have this to this point, and I have already positioned this coil perfectly. I'm going to show you how to do it on this coil. So this side here, the side with one hole versus two, there is that correct? No, this side here, there is no room for play on it. It's just a round hole. So what you want to do here is simply push the coil all the way back, tighten this down, and ensure that it truly is behind that edge or just in line with it so it doesn't rub. On this side here, there's actually a non-circular oval type hole under this screw, which I have just loosely snugged down. And this side here gives you can see that better now, a little bit of choice in moving it up and down to align the front edge of this just with the edge of that there. So what I like to do is eyeball it from this angle, which you probably can't see very well on the camera, and then as I'm eyeballing it from that angle, I take the back of a screwdriver with this just loosely snug and tap it until it is in the exact position I want it. Then I proceed to tighten this up real tight and then check that again, and if it is exactly where I want it, you're good to go. If not, you can loosen this off a bit, tap it, move it until you get exactly the spacing you want. And once that's done, the last little bits is going to be running the wire and putting on the one last bracket. Now in this case, this is the upper cylinder. It goes straight out the side there. In this case, things are a bit more tricky. This is the bottom cylinder. Now it is going to snake around the mag plate, as you see here. And in this place, you can remove this bracket and then reposition it, or you can just tuck the wire underneath it or run it through it. It is going to run underneath this bracket here on this particular mag, which I can't do one-handed in any case. It's going to run through this groove, which is pretty evident that it's meant for the wire. And once you have that all tucked in tight, and these two wires come out here, you're going to replace this little wire clamp over them there and install the screw. So we'll get right back in a sec. With two hands, that wire was very easily threaded underneath there and ran through its groove. Now the final thing is going to differ on each boat motor very slightly. It's the linkage that links the mag to the throttle advance, and in this case it just bolts into those two holes, pinning the spark plug wire down once more with two more lock screws, and simply install that. Yours might install slightly different or look different, but it's all going to do the same job. So if you have followed along successfully, it's not that difficult, this actual process. I just figured since nobody else had actually made a in-depth video on it, this would be a good thing for people maybe just starting out getting their first motor. So you should be at this point. Once you install this back on the motor via these two screws and the two screws on that side, you're going to have to gap the points with this adjuster screw and that set screw. That's a whole different thing, but that's fairly simple. In this motor, I think it's 0.002 20 thousandths or something of an inch. Once that's done, you should be able to install your flywheel, install your spark plug boot style of choice, or even just something like this would work, as long as you keep your hand away. And you're ready to go. Providing the rest of your motor is good, you should be on the lake in no time. Thanks for watching, and I hope this has helped.